The rattlesnakes have been roaming the deserts for millions of years, and their locomotion has perfected over time. The bodied snake, sometimes referred to as the jumping snake, has a physiology perfectly adapted to the sideways movement of these serpents. Undulating from side to side like its ancestors, this snake has a bulkier body in the center which becomes dedicated to locomotion. The weight is concentrated in this area, amplifying each movement into a small leap. The ends of the animal, the tail and the head, are in the air and do not touch the ground. In this position, the snake has a better appreciation of its surroundings and can better spot small vertebrates that constitute its prey. The cactus lizard is a reptile that has become entirely dependent on cacti. The spines of these plants provide protection, and they feed on the nectar of their flowers. These lizards have a long, narrow snout that allows them to reach deep into the flower, and by feeding on several different cacti, they ensure the pollination of the plant. Their appearance resembles external roots, providing excellent camouflage. They simply need to lie near a trunk and remain still until the threat passes. They live in small communities and dig burrows under the cacti. Niatini describes, in developmental biology, the retention of juvenile characteristics in adult individuals of a species. The desert mole bird is a good example of this phenomenon. The specimen depicted is indeed an adult. These animals live in abandoned underground burrows of other animals since the rock in the desert is hard and they are not equipped for digging. They live in groups of several dozen individuals, feeding on small invertebrates. Eggs are laid in special chambers where the temperature is kept constant. From hatching until death, they will never see the light of the sun. Corpses are quickly consumed by the colony itself to prevent attracting predators with the scent. Here, everything is in the name, boxer marsupial mice, which literally means a boxing marsupial mouse. Originally, these animals were small and lived under the protection of vegetation. However, 50 million years later, they have grown larger, and vegetation has decreased, forcing them to develop other means of defense. The bones of their forelimbs have evolved to form an overdeveloped pair of hands. When a predator approaches, the mouse will first attempt to hide, but if unable, it will not hesitate to literally resort to boxing. The striking power is not lethal but is sufficient to deter the attacker. Apart from this, it is a solitary insectivore with a territorial nature, using its defense technique even against its own kind. The corbel is a monogamous animal that shares its life with the same partner for its entire life. They are descendants of gerbils, and after the disappearance of megafauna in most regions, small animals quickly adapted to their ecological niche. Corbels are not very large animals, but compared to gerbils, they are giants. The female has no means of defense apart from her partner, the male, who has two small claws at the end of his tail. Their forelimbs have atrophied, and their hind limbs have developed for rapid running. Additionally, their fur provides good camouflage in sandy dunes. Both parents take care of protecting the offspring, and it's one of the animals where weaning takes the longest compared to their lifespan. The young leave their parents at the age of 5, while their longevity barely exceeds 10 years, making them much less prolific than their ancestors. The combination of Europe's drying and the disappearance of large mammals has led to the emergence of the ganado. Once, coipuas proliferated in Europe after being introduced. their rapid reproduction paving the way for rapid evolution and thus great adaptability. This animal has grown very large for a rodent, exceeding 6 meters in length, and its powerful incisors have grown proportionally. Despite its carnivorous theropod appearance reminiscent of the Mesozoic era, it has retained its vegetarian diet, feeding on nuts, grass, and tubers. However, it has become a solitary and territorial animal. During mating displays, males engage in violent fights, using their teeth to expand their territory. If Carabajax had existed today, and if there were similar armadillos like the 9-banded armadillo 50 million years ago, we would call it a living fossil. Indeed, this animal has undergone very few physiological changes despite millions of years, indicating that if the ecosystem changes little, perfectly adapted animals also change little. However, these animals were adapted to several types of ecosystems, and only those living in deserts have survived. Carabajax is still an opportunistic eater and is slightly larger, measuring over a meter long. Its ears have become tiny, and its head has rounded. It also has shorter, sturdier legs, making it slower, but protected by its shell, it fears very few predators. Hamsters are prolific animals and effective at adapting to climate changes. The shelled hamster has adapted to the uplift of Europe by tectonic plates, transforming its ecosystem into semi-arid mountains. It has developed a sturdy shell to protect itself from predators, in which it can roll into a ball like armadillos, becoming elusive. Its front legs also have large claws that allow it to dig tunnels in the ground, where their colony thrives. The network is complex and extensive as they live in large, hierarchy-free communities. Their lifestyle and appearance, aside from the shell, resemble more marmots than hamsters due to the altitude. Winters are harsh, and shelled hamsters must hibernate for several months each year. Ground squirrels once lived communally in underground burrows. 50 million years later, some, like the continental sailor, have evolved into large, solitary, bipedal rodents. Inhabiting warm regions of the earth, it has developed a sail on its back that allows it to regulate its body temperature through numerous blood vessels running through it. This form of regulation is observed in Dimetrodon or Uranosaurus, but it is entirely novel in a mammal. It has a long tail to maintain balance, as it adopts a bipedal posture that ensures great speed when running. During dry seasons, many gather around water sources, rare moments when they live together, taking advantage of these encounters to mate. In 50 million years, Australia will still be an island, and its fauna will adopt unique and bewildering forms as a result of adaptation to an insular environment. Such is the case of the woolly emu, which no longer resembles an emu at all. The animal primarily feeds on ground-level grasses, explaining its posture and downward-facing neck. Living in an ecosystem where nature is capricious, it has developed a hump on its back that serves as a fat reserve when food or water is scarce. The two protruding defenses at the front are remnants of their wings, which are useful for defending against large predators. The giant corvids have survived over the years and have evolved. Here, Neodiatrema, standing at 4 meters tall, is a very large bird. It now has only one finger on each wing, equipped with a large claw used for tearing prey or ripping branches. Surprisingly, it is faster than the giant big bull from millions of years ago, capable of hunting smaller prey. It is a feared and solitary animal, reminiscent of some giant theropods from the Mesozoic era. It lacks teeth, but its beak is powerful enough to crush anything, although it typically swallows its prey whole. It supplements its diet with fruits, nuts, or seeds. Some koalas have become very strange indeed. The kilauea, for example, has a morphology that may seem unique but has been spotted in other animals not particularly closely related. It has a highly muscular and powerful tail that supports its entire body, allowing it to leap, and it can move quite swiftly with this technique. It is a crepuscular and nocturnal animal that hunts small prey. Having a tail as support frees up all four limbs, with the hind legs becoming a second pair of arms. However, they are still more powerful than the atrophied front limbs, as the two pairs serve different functions. This animal emits distinctive calls at night, vocalizations aimed at attracting sexual partners throughout the year. Spat is a species of bat that has become diurnal, occupying the ecological niche of vultures. They live in large groups in the mountains and steppes of Asia, sometimes so numerous that they darken the landscape when they form huge swarms. They feed on insects and carrion, serving as the cleaners of their habitat. However, a hungry swarm of spat can pose a real danger to wildlife. They can attack any animal, nibbling at them one by one, causing serious injuries or even killing their prey. These episodes are rare and occur when the natural predators of spat are too scarce to regulate their population and there is not enough food for all. The Uluru bat is the largest bat of all time, as big as the giant pterosaurs of the Cretaceous period. With a wingspan of over 14 meters, this giant spends more time on the ground than in the air, with its wing membrane folded upon itself. The animal's mouth has stretched to 2 meters, enabling it to reach certain fruits that are difficult to access due to its size. They are solitary creatures, emitting guttural cries to communicate with potential mates over long distances. They can live for over 50 years and often venture to the archipelagos off what we now call Australia. It is on these small islands that females give birth. Protected from large predators, the young learn to control their large wings and eventually journey to the main island when they are ready to cross the ocean. The mandronix is the nearly direct descendant of Holocene mandrills. The African equatorial forests took millions of years to regenerate after human deforestation, and many animals and plants disappeared. Few managed to adapt, even after the extinction of Homo sapiens. The mandronix is among the survivors, having adapted to the African savannas. The extinction of large predators left an ecological niche vacant, one the primate quickly occupied. It has become much larger, with canines resembling those of the Cenozoic smilodons. It is a fast animal that lives in small groups, retaining its sociable intelligence and hierarchical structure within clans, which allows for coordinated hunting of large prey. Euryopes is a new lineage of organisms that evolved from certain quadrupedal birds from millions of years ago that had started to decline. They are bipedal and large in size, resembling the ornithomimids of the Mesozoic era. They are agile and fast runners, once carnivorous but now having shifted to a diet focused on grasses, herbs, and occasionally eggs. Individuals have elongated helmets on their heads that they use for defense against predators and as a resonating chamber for their calls. They are social animals that live in large groups, migrating along the same latitude in search of new feeding sites. At this time, the climate is much warmer than during the Holocene. Near the poles, there are no polar ice caps year-round. The forest mole bird lives in the underground of forests in these northern regions where the soil is loose and aerated. It lives much like its desert counterpart, in pre-existing tunnels and in groups of around 100 individuals. In summer, when there is no snow, they occasionally venture out into the open air to take advantage of more varied food sources. However, they are very vulnerable animals, and their outings must be done as a group and not prolonged. Plover inhabits the boreal forests, equipped with large claws allowing it to climb trees, dig burrows, and ward off various predators. It is relatively large for a rodent and stands upright on its hind legs when on the ground. They live in small communities within the tall spruce trees of the forest, and they are omnivorous, consuming anything they can catch or gather. They are rather intelligent and adept at defending their nests and offspring, with the entire community involved in caring for the young. They are descendants of small nocturnal rodents, and the extinction of their predators over a long period has facilitated this metamorphosis. Near extinction, a small community of okapi hidden in inaccessible areas of the African equatorial forests survived and adapted to less wooded areas. Over the years, they migrated northward and acclimatized to the boreal forests, replacing the former cervids. They are large, able to access vegetation at heights similar to giraffes. They move slowly through the undergrowth, but can reach speeds of over 75 kilometers per hour in case of attack. The animal has retained the ossicones on its head, characteristic of giraffes, which serve for defense and interspecific combat during mating rituals. Formerly, tupayas were fruit-eating animals the size of rats, known for daily alcohol consumption through fermented fruits. Over time, evolution has completely transformed them, making them unrecognizable. The secretive bloodsucker is a tiny parasitic mammal less than a centimeter long, without fur or tail, feeding on the blood of animals by moving through their fur. The front part of its skull has elongated to spread beyond the skin, resembling a sort of syringe, useful for sucking the blood of its host. These animals carry diseases, including a pathogen that destroys cells. Possums are marsupials that have evolved independently from their Australian cousins, yet one species, the jumping tail possum, has developed a characteristic common with the kiwaloa. The tail of this animal, already powerful, has developed further, with certain joints fused to articulate like a limb, and the tip of the tail has flattened like a beaver's tail to form a sort of foot. Additionally, the hind legs have either disappeared or are too small to be visible. The animal uses its tail to move and crush the shells of crustaceans, which make up its diet. This peculiarity is an adaptation to the dense undergrowth of inaccessible jungle. Moving by bounds saves energy. The honey hunter, a descendant of arboreal dwarf anteaters, seems to have kept more or less the same lifestyle, but appearances can be deceiving. Formerly feeding on insects, particularly ants, these animals now feed on the nectar of tropical flowers. The snout is no longer as elongated, but the tongue remains long to reach the nectar deep within the flowers. This animal is solitary and no longer descends to the forest floor, always clinging to trees with their long, sharp claws that ensure good grip. It moves slowly among the branches and is a very calm and docile animal that will simply emit a foul odor to ward off predators. The komoda is a small primate descended from lorises. Like the previous animals, its lifestyle has led to the loss of its hind legs to further develop a muscular tail. However, unlike the others, it is its arboreal life that has driven this change. Its prehensile tail has evolved with a pseudo-thumb to better grip branches, freeing up its hands for eating or interacting with conspecifics. They spend most of their time upside down, being unable to return to the ground, thus avoiding confrontations with larger predators. Like its ancestors, it primarily feeds on fruits and insects, but its diet is quite diverse. The young cling to their mother's back during the first months of their existence. During the Anthropocene, China was the largest producer of pigs, with gigantic industrial farms housing millions of pigs that were slaughtered before they even reached adolescence. But the worst part was their living conditions, confined to cages where they couldn't even move, spending their entire lives lying down awaiting death. Homo sapiens became extinct, its infrastructure collapsed, and the farmed pigs escaped, using their legs very little. Over time, remaining in the humid areas of forests, the descendants of these pigs lost their legs, retaining only their hooves which they used to dig the ground in search of tubers.